You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Power Athlete Radio. I'm John Welborn, and I'm joined by my good friend Mike Sarraille, former Navy SEAL. I can probably say that. I know we're big into the quiet professionals these days, but we can actually attach a Navy SEAL to your name because you went through selection and actually were a SEAL and then worked at development. It's the
first adjective people always attach. Like, oh, he was a Navy SEAL. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, gotcha. I mean, so was the perfect push-up. The perfect push-up was invented by the Navy SEAL, and that's the reason it sold fucking 500 billion of those things.
That guy crushed it.
Yeah. And you know the whole reason? Because it was invented by a Navy SEAL. So I think you got to add that on to everything. Like this article, invented by a Navy SEAL. This book, invented by a Navy SEAL. This methodology, invented by a Navy SEAL. But is that disingenuous? Is that treading on the good name of all the guys that came before you?
There are different views on that. Somebody who served and earned that title. So however they choose to use it when they get out is their prerogative. I think can you take it too far to extremes? You can, but the SEALs have done a good job of marketing themselves. That's without a doubt. Well,
it started in the 80s and the 90s with those catalogs. I mean, with the calendars, with the guys running in the UDTs.
That's right.
So I remember that was the first time I ever really was exposed to a SEAL outside of the movie Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen, was seeing a calendar at some store at the mall that had like hot chicks, and right next door to it, it was like firefighters, and then it was like Navy SEAls, and these dudes were running on the beach in UDTs.
I wonder if they still have that calendar.
I'm pretty sure if we Google it, it'll come up.
Okay.
But that was my deal. I'm like hot chicks in bikinis, firemen, and these Navy SEAL guys in tan shorts running on the beach.
I don't know why, if you were active, you would want to be in that calendar, because you would get nothing but shit from the guys. Like, you wouldn't hear the end of it. There's just no reward in it.
So one of the things that's synonymous with, obviously, the SEALs in the military is leadership. What does leadership mean to you at its core? I know you've written books and spoken about it, and as a keynote speaker and somebody that travels around and works with and mentoring different companies and different individuals. Like, what does leadership mean to you?
Everyone's going to have a different definition. Everyone's entitled to that definition based off of their past experiences, their perspectives. To me, I like to simplify it to just like the root. Leadership is about behavior, and there's good behaviors, and that's bad leadership. And there's good behaviors, that's good leadership. At the end of the day, it seems, and we're in an age where everyone has a microphone. It's not what you say, it's what you do. And living to your character, living, and most importantly, living the example, or what we say, set the example, which is not unique to the SEALs. That was drilled into me by the Marine Corps. And the Army has the same set of principles. Ultimately, good leadership sets the expectations, sets the standards, holds people accountable in a positive and empathetic way. But you've got to follow through on what you say. And that means if you guys are there late, you're there later than them. It's doing the right thing when especially people are, when people are looking, but especially when people are not. And, people at the end of the day are very smart. They'll read through that. And I think a great leader sort of engages in observational modeling, behavioral learning by demonstrating what right looks like, especially when the times are hard. And that's hard to do, man. Most human beings are not up for that. And if you're not, then just don't take a leadership position. Be a team member, be a contributing team member. But not everyone is fit for a leadership position. But naturally in society, whether you're in the SEALs or in the business world, you think you've got to accelerate to a position, a leadership position. That's not necessarily true. Some people are just not fit for that. And, I do disagree with that. Sometimes if somebody is strong in one specific skill set, let them stay in that skill set if that fills their cup. But I've worked for just some world-class leaders, man. So I think at the end of the day, to be completely honest, two things. One, Leadership is oral history passed down. Maybe you tweak it a little bit. But
so it's storytelling?
It's plagiarism.
Or it's storytelling?
Yeah. Leadership is absolute plagiarism that we take from the great leaders we learn from. You maybe put a spin on it, your personal style, and then pass it to the generation behind you. But, the thing about the military versus the private sector is leading in the military is just not that hard. If you do the right thing, and at the end of the day, if you remove a leader from a unit, that unit's still going to accomplish a mission because people are bought in. They've bled, sweat, and cried to get into that community for over a year. They're aligned to the mission. I just had to point my guys in the direction and just let them do their thing. So that's not the most difficult. I'm sure it's similar to pro sports.
You want thick, sidewalk splitting slabs of muscle? You want to walk into any room and turn heads like gravity just shifted? Then you need Jack Street. The same battle-tested methods I learned from over a decade in the NFL. Claim your 7-day free trial at powerathletehq.com/Jackstreet and let the gains begin.
Guys just want to
win. Dude, I coined a saying or a term or just a little cliche that I used to say that in the absence of true leadership, false prophets appear. And where that came from was we were in Philadelphia, and I don't think early on we had strong leadership. This was early in Andy Reid's career. We had some veteran guys that were kind of, come from organizations, and we were still trying to figure it out. And the young guys that had kind of got drafted and come in hadn't matured into a position of leadership. And what I realized is that all of a sudden, my whole deal was that if you lead by example, if you go out and you bust your ass and you work hard, people will follow you. Like that's an example. You can't fake that shit. You can get up and want to give inspirational speeches and beat your chest on game day and run out with the flag and do all this, rah bullshit and show up at pep rallies. But at the end of the day, the people are going to follow the people that work hard. The people that are putting in the long hours, that are busting their ass when everything is fucking tense and everything, it's 4th and 1 and you're on the goal line. Everybody's going to look at that one dude that they know that's put in the hard work. And what I realized early on, before I'd kind of ascended into a leadership position, I called it the false prophets, which were all of a sudden random dudes that didn't work hard and were full of shit would all of a sudden be like, everybody in the shower. Or they would want to call up and break the team down, or all of a sudden give some pregame speech that everybody was like, who the fuck is this guy? And I started calling them, in the absence of true leadership or strong leadership or defined leadership, false prophets, where these guys all of a sudden go out and they're not like, hey, we're going to go out there and do what we do, which is work hard. They started prophesizing. And
it's totally inauthentic.
Yeah.
And that's what sucks.
Well, it's inauthentic to the people that work hard, but all of a sudden the young guys that are easily swayed get kind of wrapped up in this bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's more like magic and being like, we're going to go out there and do exactly what we do every day, which is we're going to run the ball. We're going to block our assignments. We're going to execute at a high level and have a high level of proficiency. Like if you, in the NFL, if you practice with a certain tempo and you learn with a certain degree of, precision, and you understand the game plan and the coaches are dialed in and they know what their players can and can't do, and everybody's on the same page, you go out and you execute and you win games. The problem is when you get people out there start doing shit outside of their task, or they start out going out there and being what I call false prophets, where they're trying to do too much, or all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to get out of my lane because I might make this play, and then all of a sudden give up a big play. Those are the bullshitters, and that's what happens in the absence of true leadership. You get these false prophets.
I like that.
And then what happens is the team goes back and evaluate, and they slowly get rid of those dudes, and they just kind of end up building culture.
So you just said it. Two things based off of what you said, which really resonate with me. One, if leadership is about behavior, what is culture? And that's just behavior at scale. Can you get people to adopt the mindsets and the behaviors that drive outcomes on a mass scale within your organization?
Yeah.
And great leaders model that. I call it MBO. Mindsets drive behaviors, but behaviors drive outcomes. And I read something in Harvard Business Review, which maybe I'm wrong right there, but no. Harvard Business Review puts out some good stuff. It basically said that outcome-based leadership is dead. And I had a complete and utter allergic reaction to that, because at the end of the day, you're not judged by what you say. You're judged by what you produce. Whether it's in pro sports or
are they talking about process versus outcome?
They're talking about driving people. I think it's this work-life balance seeping in, which the work-life balance conversation, I just don't want to have it. I live to work. Two, the inspirational speeches. And I've seen clips on Instagram or social media about these somebody took a video of one of the military leaders getting up and giving this inspirational speech before the guys went outside the wire. Dude, I had nothing but an allergic reaction to that. And there's difference between my early career when I was young and I had those leaders that would give the rah-rah speech and I would just have to smile as not to.
Well, did it feel disingenuous even as a young guy, or did it ever kind of grip you?
It did. But then when later in my career, when I got to a different team, that shit just didn't happen. If anything, like, hey guys, you know what we got to get done.
Yeah, let's go out there and do our job.
And if you tried to do that at the place I was latter, somebody would have promptly told you to shut up.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we stop. We're the average age of that unit was much higher. Yeah. They would have just been shut down.
Did the lens of leadership change from the Marines to, SEAL teams? And then as you ascended farther in the SEAL teams and got to development group, and then, I ended up, doing some other things with some other people. I just wonder, like, how that lens of leadership just either got bigger, got more focused, changed, tinted. Like, how did that kind of evolution work?
Oh, it actually, so 100% it did. Love the Marine Corps. And I love the leadership. And nothing about the Marine Corps is flashy. They just, hey, we've got a job to do and we're going to get it done in this life.
What I love about Marines is every Marine loves the Marine Corps. And then when you meet people that are from the Air Force and the Army and these other branches, they have such disdain for it. But at the end of the day, I believe every Marine is like every man's a rifleman, and I love it. And they carry such pride with being part of the Marine Corps.
And they do. And I love that part. So naturally, somebody could say, then why did you switch over to the SEAL teams? I believe it was 1985 when SOCOM was starting
and you saw a calendar with UDTs.
Yeah, exactly.
And you wanted to be in the calendar.
These guys are hot.
God, those guys are so, their chests are so tan.
So a commandant named Al Gray, when SOCOM was being stood up. So commandant is the senior guy in the Marine Corps. And basically SOCOM was, telling the Marine Corps, hey, we're standing this up. Why don't you move your reconnaissance Marines over there? And Al Gray was an infantryman to the Corps, and he said, hey, no Marines are special. Every Marine's a rifleman. Mm-hmm. I disagree with that. There's still performance. If you have 100 Marines in the room, you can rank them number one, top rated Marine, right down to the least performing Marine, the number 100. That, like, performance doesn't change regardless of whatever environment you're in or whatever profession you're in. So he made the decision not to join SOCOM, and that was devastating to the Marine Corps in terms of missing out on missions.
Sure.
And so when I went into the Marine Corps, I became a recon Marine. We still were not part of SOCOM. And when the war kicked off, the recon Marines were not getting the missions that the Green Berets, SEALs, Air Force Special Operations were getting. So that was my impetus to switch. And then shortly after I switched, I became a SEAL. Yeah, I'm like, mother.
You're like, mother of God.
But, so enjoyed the Marine Corps, enjoyed my leaders, learned a lot. They set the foundation, and felt like I moved backwards when I went into the SEAL teams. I did not enjoy my time at the regular SEAL teams. And I think that was also a driver to
go to selection.
Yeah, go to selection and try something different. And then the leadership was phenomenal. And guys will always, gripe about the leaders and decisions that were made. That's human nature. You put humans together, and there's just these silos or echo chambers. But for the most part, that was probably my most formative years working for guys that I considered mentors, both senior enlisted and officers who are now admirals and command master chiefs, if not the SEAC. The current senior enlisted advisor to the chairman is a CLE 9, phenomenal leader. So having learned under those guys and just given the gravity of the mission, I really enjoyed it there. It just, I ran out of gas towards the end for a number of reasons.
So you've said in some of your speeches, and I did watch a few in preparation for this and some of the stuff you have on YouTube, leadership is everything. How did that belief shape your career in special operations and really just shape everything that you've done since then?
Because it set the overall tone for the organization. When you have a strong leader who you find inspirational, who is one, and nobody likes loud leaders. Nobody likes flamboyant leaders. I shouldn't say that. I don't. I don't need the
you don't need the false prophets.
I don't need the performative nature of leadership. I need somebody who's got a high bar. He's going to hold me accountable. He's going to push me, but when he pushes me to the brink of failure, pulls me aside, coaches and mentors me and helps me learn from it. And that's what I had later in my career, is guys that pushed, but they were fair. They were just. They just had this high emotional intelligence to them, and there was no performative BS whatsoever. And they accepted failure, and they almost rewarded it. They wanted you to push the envelope to a point, as long as it was safe, no one got hurt. They expected that of you. And then additionally, there was a high degree of trust. When they assigned you to go take a unit in Eastern Afghanistan or some other region of the world, they trusted you to make the right decisions because they had put the time in to build a relationship, understand your thought process, convey their standards and expectations. And I loved it, and it was good. And that's why it shaped, like, leadership was everything. Because did we have our share of bad bosses in the SEAL teams? 100%. No organization.
How does that happen? And the example I think of is a lot of these individuals are probably very high speed, very competent individuals, and they get to a certain point. And I was thinking about, was it Petraeus when they went and wrote that article about him? And the only thing I can remember was that his favorite beer was like Bud Light Lime.
That's odd.
And that's a weird deal. Like, that alone, I was like, first of all, I don't know if I could ever trust an individual that told me their favorite beer was Bud Light Lime.
Hey.
And that was strange. But like, those guys came in to write a piece. He was way too honest, gave them way too much access. And that ended up torpedoing.
He ended up having an affair.
Yeah, an affair, and torpedoing his career.
It's funny you bring that up, because the not necessarily the highest ranking SEAL, but a 2-star admiral who's in charge of the SEAL teams. It's known as NSW Warcom. Mm-hmm. He's the commander. Even though there's SEAL admirals that are higher in different positions, like JSOC or SOCOM, was just fired. Yeah, this happened, I believe, last week. Not a bad guy. Like, don't dislike him as a human. Didn't think he was a strong leader. Was sort of shocked when he got selected to be the admiral over the SEAL teams. I think it's like any other organization. As guys move on in their tenure, the herd thins. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of, I remember, I must have been a lieutenant, and it was 3 lieutenant commanders, 04s, got out at the 15-year mark. And these guys, each one of them were exceptional. And that sent ripples through the community, that these 3 future leaders, all who could have been admirals, just because they were good leaders, great men, chose to get out, and they sent a message. And, no coincidence, they were close friends. Mm. So we had a lot of leaders, great leaders, get out at the midway mark in their career, because maybe they just, something with the community they disagreed with, and they just, standing on moral ground, couldn't take it.
Is there a more, like, so this is an interesting piece. Is there a direct tie with, like, morality and, like, a high moral compass in leadership? Like if you're a guy like Petraeus, who's up there leading men and going through this whole thing, and then all of a sudden, you get kicked out from having an affair with, on your wife. Like, is there a way to kind of segment that? Like, can great leaders be also maybe, and here's the deal. I mean, I know you're married, and I know you have kids, and I'm married and we have kids. And, like, one of the things that you make a commitment to your family, you make a commitment to your wife and your children. And, certain people carry that higher than others. And, certain people make mistakes, and you can't necessarily hold people and burn them at the stake for the mistakes they made, but you try to hold yourself to as high I guess you could say, moral compass, or just hold yourself to a higher standard. And I wonder if leadership requires people to respect you on all fronts. Like, hey, I respect this guy. He's a great leader, but he's a morally broken individual.
I think that question is personality dependent. Morality isn't black and white. I think it's shades of gray. And people listening to this may disagree.
You know what? I will tell you from my own personal experience, and I think I fucked myself pretty early on in my NFL younger career for the fact that when I went to college, obviously being a rhetoric major, which I've talked about at fucking nauseum on these podcasts, but I was deep into reading the Stoics. And we read the Cynics and the Stoics and Marcus Aurelius and got into as the first rhetorician, which was Cicero, and, Memento Mori and Died Living and all of this very black and white. Marcus Aurelius said, don't argue about what a good man is, just be a good man. These like black and white principles. And then I go play in the NFL, which is a million shades of gray, where, people are, it's a business and money and this, and because it's a business, they're allowed to fuck you over. Did you know that? That if money's involved and it's a business, you can get fucked over. And people say things, they shake your hand, they look you in the eye, and this is what it's meant, and this, and then you realize people that are working for you aren't necessarily acting in your best interest. And you're like, well, this guy's working for me, he's on my team, not realizing he's not working in your best interest and he's working with its own. And I think when I was young, I thought everything was very black and white because of that influence early. And because that, like, you shake somebody's hand and this is the deal we made. This is what we're doing. This is my word. And it means something. Which stands
a lot more in the military. Well, that has been a rough transition for me to the private sector, is because when I give you my word, and I will always have the best intent, I'm going to try to follow through, circumstances happen and I've ended up. But first off, you got to understand what the military is. It's not a clean job. We're asking men to deploy forward, especially during the global war on terror, time and time again. And they see things, they have to do things. And I've said it before, war breaks you to a degree. But you've got to remember, these are not normal men. They don't do normal things. They're all mixed bags, but humans as a whole are mixed bags.
Well, we're flawed creatures.
We're flawed creatures. And they all have codes. And do they violate that code? Every single human being violates their code at some point in their life, some more than others.
Yeah.
And this is where I try not to pass judgment. And I know we're going to get into a subject later, but will I have an allergic reaction to somebody doing something? I will. But understanding what's going on in their life that led to that point. We had a lot of guys. So there's
context.
There's context to everything. It's just, you got to understand humans are flawed. And to our point, we've had this conversation, and this is your theory: kill your heroes.
Yeah.
And that's been, when we had the conversation.
My age old is don't have heroes. And one of the more interesting ones, and I've talked about this at different talks I've done, but one of my favorite points in history was what I call the death of the old gods before the birth of the new god. Right. So at the end, like right around, Cicero and those guys, and people wonder why, why the Stoics kind of rise. Well, like a lot of the Greek gods and the Roman gods, people had just lost faith in them. And it was before the birth of Jesus Christ had really come on. I mean, Christ is born, let's say 0, right? For example, you can debate exactly, but Christianity didn't really take hold until a couple hundred years later. It was a cult religion, and then it took hold. And so there's a huge gap in time where people didn't have somebody to look up to above, like some higher power. So they looked into themselves, and a lot of the great philosophy comes from this power within. And I think those moral compasses where, without some overarching, fatherly figure and head, up above, silently looking down, shaking a finger, people realized what their moral compass was, and they knew how to act. And that position is interesting because now all of a sudden you look and people use religion like, hey, the Bible gives me an outline for how to live, and here's the 10 commandments and this, and people follow this stuff. And do I think people are better for it? 100%. But I also feel that you as an individual have to figure out where your moral compass points and what you're okay with, and when you close your eyes at night, what you can sleep with. And I always wonder, especially for the military, where people are asked to constantly be put into positions where you probably have to bend your moral
100%. And I'll tell you what, the guys that came into the military that are just, the prototypical Bible thumper, tend not to do all that well. I look up to a lot of individuals.
Who would be some of your heroes? Or I don't mean heroes, but who would you put on your Mount Rushmore wall for leadership?
So I don't want to name names because some of them are still active. Some of them are admirals, some of them are command master chiefs, some of them are out. But would they make a decision that I highly disagreed with? 100%. And maybe I'd be a little bitter about that decision, but with time, I'd understand they maybe had a sight picture on something or information that I didn't have. But no leader's going to make great decisions all the time. And at the end of the day, you can respect them. You can try to model your behaviors after them. And I definitely have, but they're humans and they're going to make mistakes. And sometimes, society has a way of Petraeus cheated on his wife and somebody will say, hey, he's a POS.
Yeah.
Okay. You're entitled to your opinion. But are you going to define and I'm not standing up for Petraeus. I didn't really know Petraeus. Are you just going to disregard all the great things a man has done for that one decision? Now
there are a lot of people that
think
do.
There's certain things like if you engage in child abuse or something like that.
There's probably a few things you can't come back from. One of which is Bud Light Lime. But yeah, I mean that alone, like he was like, yeah, he had an affair. I'm like, all right, well, like that shit's happened since the beginning of time. Like I'm not going to burn a guy at the stake for making a bad mistake. And let's say he was in a shitty marriage. I mean, who knows, right? But like the Bud Light Lime, I don't know if you can come back from that one. But I think there are probably some things that like on the moral high ground that people can kind of look at and be like, all right, I get that one. And there's other ones that are non-negotiables.
Again, different context for different people.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, you as an individual have to figure out what you're okay with. And I wonder with the military, which is wild because, you go in and you're kind of put into this hierarchy where, I have to respect this individual and he's put in a position above me to lead. And if you don't respect that individual, is it hard to be led by that individual?
So, again, I'm going to be vague here. There was a guy who did amazing things on the battlefield and then popped for drugs. And of course, there's half the guys that say, hey, screw that guy. And to me, it was like a shoulder shrug. I'm like, okay.
What kind of drugs?
I think it was Coke.
I think they should probably give Coke to guys on the battlefield.
Right before mission?
Yeah, being like, hey guys, take this as your little happy go pills.
And to me, I automatically went to, hey, that guy must be in pain. He's trying to find an outlet. I mean, alcohol. We drink heavily in the military. And I know
it's part of the culture.
It's part of the culture, but it's how guys burn off steam.
Yeah. And
so if a guy gets drunk out in town and maybe gets in a fight or does something stupid, it was a shoulder shrug to me. I'm like, okay, we're going to get our pound of flesh. He's going to get punished. Yeah. But is it career ending? To me, no. But I wasn't always in a decision, or I wasn't in a position to make that decision. That went up to the commanders because I got out as a mid-level officer. I didn't care about that stuff. Again, I knew the stress that was on these guys. They were deploying nonstop. The operational tempo, as we call it, was insane. And, you can't put a Ferrari in the red forever. You got to put it in the shop. But unfortunately, the requirements of the war needed these guys on the battlefield and constantly deployed. And don't be surprised by the results you get when guys start doing things that don't necessarily fall under the uniform code of military justice.
Yeah. How do you balance that? You had an interesting point that you talked about checking yourself every night in the mirror. What key questions do you ask yourself? Like, when you are doing that verbal, I call it the ocular pat down. When I look at myself in the mirror, have I done what I said I was going to do that day? Have I executed what I needed to do? Have I, pushed the ball forward as far as I can? And more importantly, am I living my life in a way that I'm going to look back in 10 years and be happy about?
This one's easy to me. So one, it's what did I do well that day? More importantly, what did I do poorly? And how do I fix that moving forward? But you just said it. To me, it's the guys we lost. Would the guys that we lost that I knew be looking down and saying, hey, man, you're doing a good job.
Yeah. Keep
going. Or would they that day say, hey, man, you fell really short today? And that I think I will never lose that. I think a lot of vets would probably agree that lost guys, they're not far from your mind, but that's sort of my bar. What would those guys say? Am I living in a way that upholds their memory? Am I living in a way that if they were here, they would have done the same thing? And knowing some of those guys too.
Dude,
That's a loose standard sometimes.
What about humility for leaders? Like, let's say you have a leader that comes in and who makes a mistake. And one of the biggest things for me as an individual is if somebody's in a leadership position and they can admit fault and they can stand up and say, hey, I fucked this one up. And unfortunately, I'm going to learn from it and we're going to move forward. Opposed from leaders who refuse and will never accept fault. And I've been around people that cannot accept fault, are never wrong. And even when things, and we all know, and they still can't do it, to me, that is a lack of either growth or maturity, but just one of those things where I'm like, if you made a mistake, say, yeah, I fucked up, and we'll move forward. And this is something I work with my kids constantly, like stupid things. Like, and I know this is really dumb, but my daughters, like my wife buys like, I don't know, like Spindrift drinks, right? For example, they like crack, those canned drinks, Spindrifts, they're like sparkling water drinks. So the kids, she buys those for the kids. And what they do is they crack one, they take a sip, and then they let it sit there. And then I'll walk by and be like, what the fuck is this? And it's like a full drink and it's been sitting there and it's warm. And I kind of just watch it and it doesn't move. And like at the end of the day, I either pour it out. So I just started putting them back in the fridge and drinking them. And then just kind of like finally be like, who is doing this? You guys are like bombing my house with like crapping these things. And they're like, oh, that's me. I'm like, why would you take? And I was like, you guys have never drank alcohol. This is how I know you guys have never drank a beer, because I don't know anybody that cracks a beer, takes a sip, and then lets it get warm, because then it's just terrible. If you crack the beer, you drink the beer when it's cold. And I've asked them numerous times, and they do this all the time. And I know it's both of them. And they're like, no, it's not me. And so it's funny. We had this like interesting talk where I'm like, I'm not mad about the drinks. I just want to know, because this is strange behavior, why you would crack a drink and just take a sip. And like, they will not admit this. And this has turned into the thing where I told my wife, I'm like, just don't buy them. I'm like, I'm tired of walking around picking up drinks. So that's an interesting metaphor for like my kids. But I think with leadership, a lot of times people crack it, they take a sip and they just let it sit and they don't really do anything with it. They don't finish the drink. They just kind of let it kind of get warm and just awkwardly sit there, instead of being like, yeah, that's mine to clean up. I'll clean up that mess. Don't worry about it. This won't happen again.
So the great leaders I've worked for make a decision, and sometimes they make a decision that's unpopular. And if it doesn't work out, they come right back and say, hey guys, I was wrong. This is the information I had. This was my thought process. It didn't work out the way I intended. And not necessarily apologizing. We don't need an apology, just a recognition of it was not the right decision. Here's what I've learned. Here's what I'm going to do moving forward. Versus the smartest man in the room complex who cannot admit fault. And, we've talked about the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah.
When you're young, and this is not everyone, and you've had some measure of success, of course that breeds confidence, and with confidence, arrogance, until you're just hit hard. The more adversity you can throw towards young people and have them fail, I think you expedite that journey along the Dunning-Kruger effect to where you realize you don't know what you don't know. And you're trying to make the best decisions with incomplete information, knowing that it may be the wrong decision. And somebody who's very steeped in adversity and failure, and I think comes to the realization quicker that you just don't know what you don't know. And that's where you rely on your team. I always called it the brain trust. Well, I may be an officer and maybe I got 20 guys. That was my brain trust, because the aggregate intelligence, experience of those guys would always far outweigh me. Now there's some dynamics there. Is there a strong sort of, again, echo chamber amongst those 20 or a group within those 20 that sort of dominates everything? And sometimes you got to contend with that. And that group think can 100% be wrong. And that's what's hard about leadership is you've got to make unpopular decisions based off of what you think is right, not for the individuals, but for that team or that organization as a whole. And again, it goes to show people are not everyone is comfortable being in that position where, dude, when you're in a leadership position, people are watching, people are judging. And if you can't get comfortable with that, then you're going to wear out quickly.
So what allows a leader to have longevity? Is it humility? Is it the ability to make a decision, reflect upon the decision? If they made a mistake, admit it? Because for the individuals that they are leading, if it shows a certain level of humility and self-reflection, that allows you to, I respect the shit out of people that do that. If you're in a leadership position and you make a mistake and you have the humility to admit that your mistake and then learn from that mistake and not make it again, that gives me great trust in you as an individual. What I don't get good trust in is when the smartest man in the room and I never make a mistake and it's everybody else's fault and they're great at having the finger pointed. And I feel that
I made a decision and it wasn't executed properly.
Yeah.
And that's why it failed.
Yeah. No, my decision was perfect. It was your guys' fault. Opposed from, even if that's true, certain leaders would be like, hey, at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. And if we didn't succeed, it's because I didn't succeed for you. I've always felt that those are the people I'll follow through the gates of hell. The other people I'll fucking push off a cliff.
In terms of longevity, there's a phrase in the Marine Corps, predominantly it's in the military as a whole, but leaders eat last. And I tried to live to that. And maybe there was some showmanship to that with the guys of like, hey, I'm putting you before me. Gear came in, make sure all the boys get the gear before I do. And a lot of times gear wasn't left over. Come back off a mission, I would hold the door into the chow hall to let the guys go first. I remember that pissed off one of my master chiefs who finally yelled at me. He's like, just get in the fucking line and get some food. So with that, where I'm going with that is, I didn't learn until late in my military career that sometimes to be the best leader, you've got to be selfish at times. You've got to step aside and take better care of yourself in order to take, to show up as the best version of yourself.
Sure. To
take better care of the guys. But in terms, so there's a balance there. But I think its impact is pouring into your people. And the root of my system of leadership is based off love. I loved my guys, my men and my women, a lot more than I hated the enemy. And it has nothing to do with whether I like an individual or not. If they're on my team, I'm going to love them one way or the other. I'm going to hold them accountable because I believe the highest form of love is accountability and standards. And accountability can be delivered if they know it's authentic and genuine in a very positive way, because it creates this learning environment of like, hey, you made a decision, didn't work out the way you intended. Let's have a hard conversation about it. Let's learn from it. Let's share what you've learned and move on. But I think if you're pouring into your people, if you're inspiring your people and you see that you're making the people around you better and they're making you better as well, it fills your cup. But back to my first point, leadership can be taxing. It can be soul crushing at times. So you've just got to make sure that you're coming off the line to take care of yourself at times. And I didn't manage that well towards the end of my military career, and hence divorce and everything else that went on.
Yeah. If you could impart one piece of advice to future leaders, what would it be?
Make decisions that may not end up in your favor, which sometimes is standing on moral ground or sticking your sword in the sand, where you can wake up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror. And most careers, I've seen careers end because they stood on moral ground, but they stood on the right moral ground. They weren't willing to violate their code, and their leadership essentially fired them or forced them out. But if you make decisions that you are confident in, that you believe are right, and you can wake up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror, you're doing the right thing. So, I think, and that there's balance there too. Are you creating a mountain out of a molehill? Like some things you just say, hey, I don't believe in this. The decision is being made. I'm going to execute. But there are those things we all see in our career, or those moments where you've got to make a hard decision that if you know something's not right, you stand against your leaders, you make the right decision, and don't be surprised when it doesn't work out in your favor, but you can walk away with your head held high.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Power Athlete Radio. This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. Hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by ko-fi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/powerathlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.